Hi. Okay. Huh? No, I have Wi-Fi. I'm going to just plug in my phone because it's a little low on juice. And let's try this again.
Because you were talking, he was on the
I
screen.
know he was on, but I couldn't see him. So let's try it again. Okay. I'll show you because he was on, but I couldn't see him, which was odd. Try and turn your Wi-Fi off.
Okay.
Hi, Preet.
Hey,
How
how's it
are
going?
you? Sorry about the technical
So,
difficulties,
so,
but
so am I doing this right?
yeah, you're doing it right. Give
Okay.
give yourself a little more headroom. You look so handsome, Preet.
Oh, and you look beautiful.
Not
This
really.
has gotten off to a great start. let's just compliment each other. Nice specs.
Good. Yeah, exactly. We can spend the whole time doing that. No, a lot of people are super interested in what's going on legally, what President Trump is up to, about pardons, about what's happening with the death penalty. So let me just start right with let me just get into it right away, Preet.
Okay, we're not going to talk about Thanksgiving. We're just going to go straight to the law stuff.
Well, how
All
are
right.
you? How are you and your cute family
I'm
doing?
good. I'm very thankful for many things, even though things are bad. And you?
I'm good. You know, I feel very, very lucky. There's a lot of people suffering and struggling. And anytime I feel the urge to complain, I just shut the you know what up.
Yes. I feel the
So,
same way. I feel the
yeah.
same way. All right, so law stuff.
Yeah, let's start. Okay, so let me ask you about this Fox News interview that President Trump did yesterday. He accused the FBI and the Justice Department of missing in action and ignoring his claims of massive voting fraud. Are you surprised, Preet, that he continues to insist that this election was rigged? And I mean, just as somebody who's so smart and understands the law so well, I mean, what do you make of all this?
Well, it's all a PR campaign, if you ask me. I mean, here, I've said this before. You have a sitting president of the United States of America. There should be a line. There should be a line down the block of the most brilliant lawyers in the country who are prepared to come to your defense and to bring lawsuits on your behalf. Even if they're not the best and most well-grounded lawsuits based on fact and law. I mean, you saw that in 2000. You had gigantic legendary lawyers like David Boies on one side and an amazing lawyer, Ted Wells on the, not Ted Wells, I'm forgetting his name now. Ted Olson. Ted Olson on the other side.
Right. John is here to help us.
Yes, thank you. And I don't mean to disparage individual lawyers, but the dream team, these folks aren't. And you'll see that law firms are staying away from these kinds of cases. They don't want to make frivolous claims because they have reputations and they have careers and lives to live beyond this craziness of transition. So, the first sign that you know that something is wrong is the quality of the lawyers. And then the lawyers, the complaints that they're bringing, and this may seem like a small thing, but spelling mistakes, filing in the wrong court, naming the wrong parties, all those kinds of things are not what you see ordinarily, even in regular cases in state and federal court. But to see it on behalf of a sitting president of the United States, the most powerful person in the world, tells you something about the quality of the arguments being made. And for him, it seems to me to be laying the groundwork to convince, a subset of the population, his base, that the election was stolen from him through the courts. Now, I think it's backfired a little bit because I think he could have made all those claims about election fraud and said it on Fox and said it on OANN and Newsmax and wherever else he's allowed to peddle his lies. But I think at least with some, group of people, the fact that he loses again and again and again and again, 30-something times before courts that, by the way, have judges who are appointed by him and were appointed by other Republicans. It makes it a little bit harder to make the argument that he's been robbed.
Right. And you bring up a couple of points, and someone just actually commented, and I was going to ask you the same thing.
Froze.
What the hell happened to Rudy Giuliani? Honestly, what happened to him?
I don't know. And he had my job. He was a U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York years before I had it. And when asked this question, and I have time, I will say Rudy was a very smart United States attorney and a very good lawyer. He's the last U.S. attorney that I can remember, going up until the present, who personally tried criminal cases. I didn't, Mary Jo White didn't, Others didn't, but he did. So he was once upon a time a very formidable lawyer. And I will also say that when I became,
I was going to say, in a very impressive mayor on 9/11, he did an extraordinary job. And what, I mean, you know the guy.
So I don't know, he was very kind to me. I went and had a meal with every former U.S. attorney to get their advice and counsel and kiss of the ring, because I wanted to learn how I should do this job. I was only a 40-year-old guy.
Right.
Rudy Giuliani had it when he was even younger. And something has happened in the last few years where he makes terrible arguments. He seems to embarrass himself more with each event. I mean, just a few weeks ago, there was the Borat movie, right?
Right.
And people thought that's pretty embarrassing for the former mayor of New York City, America's mayor. Then he did one better when he had that press conference at Four Seasons Total Landscaping. And then he I think beat himself out again when he did that press conference with Sidney Powell and others.
That was,
and I don't know. It's hard for me to judge. I don't know. You know him and covered him as mayor.
yeah.
I remember I was watching you on 9/11 on NBC when all that was going on, and I know that you had then Mayor Giuliani on the show, and you didn't always agree with him. And there were a lot of things that he did as mayor that maybe many people, reasonable people, myself included, as a resident of the city, didn't agree with. But you thought he was a smart, formidable person.
Right.
And he doesn't act that way anymore. And I don't know why the president retains him for this purpose. I think he retains him as a TV lawyer rather than as an actual lawyer.
Well, do you think he's paying him a lot of money? I mean, what is...
Well, my understanding was during impeachment, he wasn't paying him anything. And then there were reports that Rudy was requesting and demanding $20,000 a day. Based on the quality of the work and based on the track record of Trump paying contractors, whether it's lawyers or builders or bakers or whoever, I think he's not getting that. I think he's not getting that.
So, any of, I mean, other than Rudy do you know any of these lawyers who are working on these cases? Have you heard of them? What? Oh, John's talking. Go ahead.
What? Does he want to interject?
No, he's fine. He's just, huh? The Ellis woman is terrible, he says.
I don't like to say people are terrible, but yes, she's not. She's very good at talking. I saw her at Bill Maher.
Yeah, she did a good job on Bill Maher.
I think not everyone loves Bill Maher. I've been on the show. He's been generous to me. I think Bill Maher wasn't prepared, to really take her to task and ask her the right questions, because she sort of jumbles things around and conflates things and distances herself from other Trump allies who are bringing suits on his behalf. Sidney Powell, I only know by reputation, and she came into field and vision and view when she started representing Michael Flynn. And I think they made some mistakes there as well. And, these recent filings don't make a lot of sense. And by the way, just to pick one, this Third Circuit ruling that, this intermediate court of appeal, between the district court, the trial court, and the Supreme Court, lots of lawyers hate the idea that we refer to judges as Obama-appointed judges or Trump-appointed judges. And I agree that that's a problem. It's not a great practice. But you kind of have no choice in the universe in which Trump and his lawyers will attack a decision, not based on the merits or the quality of the reasoning, but based on whether the judge was an Obama appointee or not. And they did that, by the way, in the district court in Pennsylvania, and attacked the judge as an Obama appointee, when it turns out that was a judge who was sentenced to the bench based on some understanding with Senator Toomey, I believe, who was in the NRA or affiliated with the NRA and the Federalist Society, and was a tried and true Republican. And so in response to that, lawyers like me who comment on these things kind of feel the need to point out that in the Third Circuit, when he got slammed by a unanimous panel, the judge who wrote the opinion, an alum of SDNY, Stephanus Bibas, was appointed by Trump with great fanfare in 2017, and the other two judges appointed by Bush, I believe. And so you can't just point to the nature of the appointment anymore, because you have losses from progressive judges, Republican judges, basically all the judges.
And in fact, some of these judges and Republican state officials are getting a lot of praise for standing up to him and following the rule of law and not being influenced or coerced by the president.
That's certainly true, but they're getting a lot of praise from people who are not allies of the president. You see in Georgia, for example, a Secretary of State who's come under fire from progressives for other reasons, and a governor who a lot of progressives had problems with, who, there's a limit to what they can do and circumvent the laws for the President of the United States. And it proves, this is not a legal point, but to me, it proves over and over and over again that no matter how loyal you are to the president, whether you're Fox News or Bill Barr or Paul Manafort, no matter who you are, you run afoul of the president one time, you do something that he doesn't like, you're thrown under the bus. I mean, look at how much Bill Barr seems to have prostrated himself on behalf of the personal interests of the President of the United States. But the fact that he didn't cause, that report, some report about the investigation of the investigators to be brought to light before the election, Trump is bad-mouthing the guy. Jeff Sessions, who he humiliated, who was his first Senate supporter, one might say helped him get some momentum along the way on his race. I don't agree with a lot of stuff Jeff Sessions did, but the one thing that he did that was correct, that was ethical, based on the views of the career people in the Justice Department, was recuse himself from the Russia investigation. For that, he was humiliated. So now look at Governor Kemp. He's being humiliated in the same way, even though he's done everything right, and a lot of things, maybe not perfectly well, in the service of the president's political interests. You can't win.
Well, why do you think so many Republicans refuse to criticize him or to, basically disagree with him with the notion that the election was rigged, or has still called president?
You should ask all of those fine elected officials that question. My armchair theory, as acting as a non-lawyer for a second, is they don't want to piss off his base. And Donald Trump is not going away. He's not leaving the scene. And you saw the reporting, right, the other day, which I totally credit. And that is that Donald Trump, not only is he potentially planning to run again in 2024, but to make the announcement in counter-programming fashion at the same time that Joe Biden is going to be raising his hand to take the oath of office.
I saw that, and that is so outrageous.
But you believe it, don't you? You credit it. Seems totally plausible to me.
Of course I believe it. A lot of people are asking if Rudy Giuliani could be disbarred.
I don't know, the standards for that kind of thing and for sanction against lawyers, whether you like it or not, is pretty high. The other thing I'll say is that there's a big distinction, and other people made this point as well, between the kinds of things that these lawyers are saying when they go on television and do press conferences and the kinds of things they're saying in court. This is not just true of, there are instances where they have come on television and they have said fraud, 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 and then you see that the narrow allegations in court don't say fraud. They say, these other bad things happened, and they're taking issue with those things. That's a phenomenon, by the way, that we've noticed for a long time. Like Donald Trump, Roger Stone, Michael Cohen, all these people, they say all these crazy things on television. They couldn't do this to you, Katie, but they dance around television hosts because there's limited time and there's no judge to impose order and truth. There's no gavel. They didn't swear on oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But then you get them in a courtroom, and you see it again and again and again. And there are examples of this with Donald Trump when he's had to be deposed by lawyers under oath. The tune changes, and so we see mostly what Rudy Giuliani has been saying in the public square, for which you typically don't get sanctioned and certainly not disbarred. But he says very different things when they're filing things, much narrower things in court, which goes back to your first question: why are they doing this? I think they're sort of keeping up the facade of fight and a spectacle of legal challenge to convince a lot of people that what went on was a robbery of the election. Meanwhile,
they're kowtowing to Trump. They're trying to please him, and for whatever reason, maybe they want a job on his new conservative news network. But they seem to just continue to kowtow to him for reasons that are really pretty disturbing. Yeah,
but the good news is, the universe, there's still too many and more people than can be explained. But the universe of people who are kowtowing to him and doing his bidding is dwindling. It's fewer than it was. And you saw this, like, when they're, not to put too much stock in this, because there can be, I think, reasonably a lot of disappointment with a lot of Republicans who have gone along with the president's mythology here. But, when it came to the issue of getting the presidential daily brief and national security briefings at a higher level for Biden, a lot of senators, did break and say, what, Republican senators, Biden should be getting that. So that's a small, teeny tiny, small, hopeful sign.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the legal things ahead. So they're still trying to make a case in Pennsylvania. They've won 1 out of 40. Our friend Neil Katyal gives a nightly update
Yeah.
on what's going on legally. They've won 1 out of 40 cases, right? And today, Arizona and Wisconsin certified their election results. I mean, it's game over, isn't it?
It's over.
I mean,
It's been over. It's been over for a while. Even with respect to some of these cases they brought, like in Pennsylvania, the relief that they sought in one or more actions was to prevent the certification. And so once the certification happened in Pennsylvania, any suit that was brought on that basis was rendered moot, as lawyers would say, because the certification already happened. You can't undo the certification. Maybe there's some other way you can do that that would also fail. But this thing is over. All the important states, the swing states, have certified. There's not much else to happen.
could it go
The
to the
electors.
court, Preet? Could it go to the court?
You know, pending and on which they have lost, the Supreme Court has a very, very, very tiny chance of taking them up because of what the procedural posture is and because of what the relief that's been sought and because of the relief that's been sought. For example, in the case that I mentioned, Pennsylvania. So I think there's a slim to nil chance the Supreme Court is going to bail the president out. Look, this also reflects a fundamental misunderstanding.
Really? There's a chance of that?
No, I never say zero. I try not to say zero, but it's pretty close to zero.
What about the Southern District of New York? I mean, what kind of charges could he face? And
So
can you just kind of simplify that?
Yeah, I mean, it's unclear what other things they're looking at. You have Lev Parnas and that Igor gentleman who were prosecuted by my former office. There's a report relatively recently that seemed to confirm that Rudy Giuliani is still under investigation. Just because you're under investigation doesn't mean there are going to be charges. We investigated lots of people. Sometimes we brought charges, sometimes we didn't. Depends on what the facts and the law counsel. There's this sort of little bit of unfinished business in the Southern District. I have no inside knowledge about it. But remember, the president's former lawyer, personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, his fixer, pled guilty to a particular charge, multiple charges, one of which had to do with the payments to Stormy Daniels. And in connection with his guilty plea, he said that he undertook that conduct at the direction of and in coordination with individual one, who's Donald Trump, right? We now know. Mm-hmm. Ordinarily, you would wonder what's going to happen to that individual. Obviously, as we all know now, based on Office of Legal Counsel guidance within the Justice Department, sitting president can't be prosecuted. That's at least the prevailing view at the Justice Department. Is that a reason why he wasn't charged? Is there a failure of proof? Is there a problem with signing up Michael Cohen as a cooperator such that you can't charge individual one because you can't trust that a jury will find credible Michael Cohen, who was told a lot of lies in his lifetime? I don't know, but that final shoe hasn't dropped, and there was a pretty clear statement in that guilty plea that some other person, namely the president, participated in the crime. He did it at the behest of that other person. And then beyond that, there may be all sorts of things that we don't know about that they're looking at, or that Letitia James is looking at as the state AG, or that Cy Vance is looking at as the Manhattan DA.
Like what? Can you just give us some idea of what what they involve, without getting into the particulars of the case?
So we know some things that Cy Vance, the district attorney, is looking at because there has been litigation over whether or not they could receive financial documents and tax returns and other material prepared by the president's accountants. And in making the requests for that information and then litigating that issue, the DA's office has made some representations about the kinds of things they're looking at. Among them could be evading taxes, tax fraud, could be bank fraud. In other words, possibly inflating assets and collateral in an attempt to get a higher, loan from the bank, so your lending capacity is higher. Making false representations in other contexts to lower your tax liability. So it's some combination of, I think, tax issues, misrepresentations to financial institutions. But, we probably don't know all of it. And sometimes it's the case that all this ends with no, shoe dropping and there's no charge. And sometimes when you go on your merry way, you find things in plain sight because you're looking at this, and you look over here and you see these other things that are happening with banks. That's happened in public corruption cases that I oversaw in SDNY all the time, and we might not know about those things.
So to be determined. But of course, that brings me to my next question, Preet. and one that I think has been the subject of on cable news for the last several days. Can he pardon himself?
So I say no. If you look at the text and the structure of the Constitution and you look at common sense, you shouldn't be able to pardon yourself. On the other hand, it's never been addressed by any court because nobody has ever thought to do it. The only time it came up was back in 1974 when Nixon was in office, and I guess there was some swirling notion that maybe the president would try to pardon himself, or maybe he asked the question aloud. And in a very, very, very short, and OLC is not known for doing short things, in a very, very short treatment, they basically cited the principle that, just as no man can be a judge in his own case, you can't pardon yourself based on that principle. But that's pretty bare bones. There are other experts who make the claim that, the Constitution says that the president can grant a pardon, and the language of granting a pardon means it must be to some other person. It can't be, you don't grant something to yourself. And I think all those arguments are good and strong, but they're not tested. And so, I have come to the view that the president, because he doesn't care how it looks. I think it looks terrible. A normal president, it would look terrible to pardon yourself because it's kind of suggesting that you have some criminal exposure. But I think the president has his base so worked up, he can just say, and tell me what you think of this, he can just say, you know what? It's been hoax after hoax after hoax. I'm channeling the president. This is my view. First it was Russia, then it was Ukraine, and it's just going to be hassling me and my family till the end of my days. These Democrats, are full of hoax. They're never going to leave me alone. I don't want to do this. But you saw how they've treated me. They want to run me into the ground now that I'm not president. So in an abundance of caution to prevent that harassment and these hoaxes from being perpetrated against me going forward, I'm going to issue a pardon for myself. And his base will think that's great. And the rest of us will think it's stupid and outrageous. And then it will only get litigated if someday some prosecutor tries to bring a federal case against him, and then a court will decide.
Well, wait, so is there anybody or any way that someone says, wait a second, you can't do that? Or
sure,
does he just have the ability to say that?
No, Mike Pence, who has been a great regulatory chilling effect on Donald Trump's nastier behavior. No, I'm joking, obviously.
Yeah.
We started this conversation with a discussion of how nobody around the president stops him, tells him not to do certain things. I mean, you would think a simple thing would be to tell him to stop lying about even small things. And I don't think there's anybody out there who can get him to stop. Look, and it might be some people, including Jared Kushner and others, tell him, screw these guys. Go ahead and issue the self-pardon, and maybe you'll never need it because no one will ever charge you. And I wonder what kind of effect it'll have on a future prosecutor thinking, well, there's this pardon. I'm going to have to litigate that. It may backfire. It may cause people in a close case to say, yeah, I think we should test this because it's outrageous for a president to issue what he claims is a self-pardon. And so we should push the envelope. It could have the opposite effect. It's just unclear. But there's nobody regulating him.
But you're saying it's completely within his power to do it. There's nothing institutionally or systematically that could put the kibosh on that. It would have to be challenged in court, the pardon itself.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a semantic issue. I don't think he has the power to do so. I think logic and the Constitution and general precedent says you can't do it. But who's going to stop him from issuing a document that says that thing that I and Neil and other armchair lawyers say you can't do? It's just a document, right? And especially if it's done preemptively, in advance of any charge being filed, there's nothing to be done with it. I mean, I don't know who would have standing to say as a legal matter, this document that claims to be a self-pardon is BS. Like, some controversy has to arise. And the clearest way that would arise, as I see it, is if there actually comes a time when he gets charged. And then he and his lawyers raise as a defense, not so fast, I have this document. It's a pardon. And then we can argue about whether or not I was allowed to do it. But until that happens, I don't know what you can do to stop the president from issuing a particular document that has the words, pardon at the top.
A lot of people, of course, we live in a very polarized country, and a lot of people are saying, well, what about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden? Of course, there's that secondary or parallel narrative going on among Trump supporters. And I'm curious for you to weigh in on that to help people understand that a little better, if you can.
Yeah, I mean, people have forgotten. My daughter asked me the other day, and she meant this not sarcastically. She's like, "Was impeachment this year?" I said, "Yeah, honey, this year. It was like 10 months ago." Without rehashing all of it, there you have a circumstance in which lots of people were making up stories about what Hunter Biden did or did not do. And I think the overwhelming weight of the evidence, as much of which was adduced by Chairman Adam Schiff during those impeachment proceedings, is that Donald Trump himself didn't even believe that there was corruption or something bad happening. Because as I thought was one of the most important moments in all of that testimony, was that all Donald Trump wanted was the announcement of an investigation. If you really care about truth, you really care about corruption, you actually want there to be accountability. If all you're seeking is political damage to your opponent, then what you care about is the announcement, right? It would not have been enough to quietly investigate and do the right thing, and it was sufficient to just announce and not do anything else, because that got him what he wanted. And this idea that Donald Trump cared about corruption and doesn't care about politics is belied by action after action after action on the part of Donald Trump. The most famous of which was a few weeks before the 2018 midterm election. In two different cases, his Justice Department, the Trump Justice Department, if you can call it that, arrested in separate cases 2 Republican congressmen. And the president, to me, as someone who cares about the the longstanding tradition of the Justice Department and being separated from politics, and it's hard to choose which is what are the worst tweets that the president has ever posted, this would be in the running. He basically said, "Way to go, Jeff Sessions." I'm paraphrasing. We have an election to win, and the Justice Department is charging Republicans with crimes. That is the exact opposite of what he claimed his posture was in the Hunter Biden, imbroglio, right? That he cares about corruption. Everything about what he did was about political payback and about fearing what he was right to fear, a successful candidacy by Joe Biden. And what Biden and others did in connection with trying to get that prosecutor in Ukraine fired was openly done and consistent with American policy, not in defiance of American policy.
It's, I think the media and how it handled it has been discussed and debated, but I think there was a lot of reticence to not do the same thing that happened in 2016 with Hillary Clinton's emails, which, they kept harping on that for so long, right before the election. And I think there was a resistance to buy into the whole thing for Joe Biden. And that's what basically I think people didn't understand, why the media didn't want to discuss something that, give a lot of light to something that just had no validity.
Yeah. So do you think your profession did a better job this time around?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I think they resisted the urge. I think the problem is it depends on what media outlet you watch in terms of the story or the narrative that you're hearing, and that is getting reinforced over and over again for you. And that's why people are so, I think, confused by this, because we're living in a parallel universe.
No, I think that's right. The other thing I will say, you didn't ask this, but I'm just, as you think about the last 4 years, people are very, very quick, without having seen the evidence, without having been in the grand jury, because obviously they can't be, with respect to any politician that they don't like,
right,
at a very high level, lock them up or lock her up. And, it's something that's unfortunate. And I think it's been perpetuated by and advanced by and popularized by Donald Trump. He says things like, I remember him standing outside of an airplane not too long, a few weeks ago, before the election. And I think he said, Joe Biden should be in prison. And he doesn't articulate any basis or any reason. He said that about Obama. And he says to a reporter, "And you're not covering some of this stuff, and you should be in prison." Like, I'm not aware of the criminal statute that was violated by that. And he says it very casually, but there's a real danger in that, because it encourages lots of people to say, when they have a political difference with somebody, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or Donald Trump, and I think Donald Trump is the worst example of this, but it happens on the other side too sometimes. The immediate,
Default.
impulse is jail, 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 which is interesting at a time when we're overall having a discussion about not over-criminalizing things. Some things are criminal, and people should be held accountable. And Donald Trump, if he's committed crimes, and we get around the self-pardon potential issue, should be held accountable for those things. But people shouldn't be shouting, I think, and this is not the most popular thing to say, at every drop of the hat, prison, prison, prison. If prosecutors handle their cases that way, I don't think they would have respect for very long.
Well, didn't that start during the 2016 campaign at Trump rallies saying lock her up?
100%.
I mean, I remember covering the Republican convention and walking outside in an alley and seeing these just horrendous anti-Hillary buttons and T-shirts and paraphernalia being, sold by these vendors. And it was just the level of coarseness that the American political system has stooped to, unfortunately led by the president himself, is really appalling. And I don't know if you can put the genie back into the bottle, Preet, or not. But I do think that President-elect Biden comports himself in a very different way than Donald Trump. Now, are people going to get bored with that? The media.
I'm excited to be bored.
Well, I always said that Joe Biden's campaign slogan should have been "Make the news boring again."
Yeah, look, that was the slogan of some other people who ran and didn't get very far. I think Senator Bennett said, "So you'll forget about me for days at a time if you elect me president." And I think,
I was going to say, well, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I think it will be nice not to have to think about, what you're missing if you're offline for 2 hours in terms of something crazy that the president has done. And there are these arguments that people have from time to time about, running the spectrum. We should care about politics. And I think it's great that more people voted. And my kids are much more engaged. They're all teenagers, much more engaged than I was as a teenager. And I was pretty engaged as a teenager. But politics can't be everything in your life, right? I know people who stopped reading and stopped, engaging in other activities because they're consumed by the president. I mean, I always said that, Donald Trump's goal in life was not to have the most power or to become the president. His goal in life, which he has masterfully achieved, was to be the most talked about person on the planet. And he achieved that.
I was going to say accomplished, right?
Yeah.
And, I think the media should continue or not to cover him. I hope that, that's a tricky proposition. Do you just kind of do a Trump-free zone, or,
you can do that, I think, individually. It's like practicing your, the particular faith, or, what dietary restrictions you follow. But it's going to be hard for members of the media if Donald Trump is a declared candidate for 2024. I think that's why he's going to do it. It kind of it makes him more than just, an interesting ex-president who causes mischief and tweets. He's a real player in the contest. And he's the presumptive front runner. He's the presumptive nominee in 2024. And both, like, the structure of how the media has to cover someone who's going to be potentially the person who runs against Biden or Kamala Harris if Biden doesn't run again, combined with his own his insatiable appetite for attention. The way I put it is, do you really think Donald Trump wants to cede the spotlight to Josh Hawley? I don't see that. No disrespect to Josh Hawley, but Donald Trump does not going to want to play a backseat role for the next 4 years. And I think it's going to be an interesting question for journalists is how do you cover him when he's not just a former president, but potentially a future president?
And when their ratings start to go down because you don't have engagement through enragement, right?
Right. Yeah.
Hey,
and
before we go, I want to, what's Bill Barr going to do after this?
I hope he will go away.
But I mean, will he work at a law firm?
I suppose there are law firms that will have people. I think there are law firms that will not have him. I mean, it's my understanding that Jeff Sessions was having a hard time finding a spot at a firm because, the larger firms have lots of clients. Some of this has been reported with respect to the firms that were representing the president in these election cases too. And there's a debate about whether or not that's a good thing. And, should clients, care about what other clients the law firm has. But there's enough anger about Bill Barr that I don't think every place will have open arms for him.
What will the long-lasting effects of the way he has served as Attorney General? Will these long-lasting effects go away? Well, that's a dumb question, but will they? How will it change the office of the AG?
Well, hopefully not. And there have been other times, and I've been involved in some of these investigations of the Department of Justice when I worked in the Senate, for example.
Right?
What's that?
You've got John Mitchell, so it's
Yeah, and I think so long as, and I have every reason to think this will be true, so long as the next administration reverts back to the best traditions of that place, which is separation of politics from law enforcement, an attorney general who makes it clear both in deed and in word that they are not representing the president of the United States. And you saw some of this, by the way, when he unveiled some of his earliest cabinet picks, and it was very notable that they got up to the podium, and rather than heap praise like they would have, people would on Kim Jong-un in North Korea upon dear leader, some of them made what are kind of amazing statements given the last 4 years, that while they're honored to be appointed by the president-elect, they don't serve the president-elect. Their loyalty and their oath is to the people, not to this person. So, beginning with that cultural change, that the new people who come in, particularly at the Department of Justice, make it clear to everyone, I work for the public, and I'm supposed to support and defend the Constitution, not any particular man at whose pleasure I may serve. That seems like a small thing, but it's actually an enormous thing, and helps a long way going back to where it should have been.
Don't you think the Biden administration realizes it, appreciates it, and believes that is the role?
I think so. I think so, at least with what they're saying. I mean, you can always get a bad egg in any administration, Democrat or Republican. But the one favor, and I hesitate to use this word, that Trump may have done is causing everyone who's in the brain trust of Vice President Biden, and I'm not one of those people, but I know some of those people, to really swing the pendulum back more forcefully than they might have before. It's like everything else. After Nixon in '74, you had all these reforms. There were reforms to the intelligence community. There was required briefings of members of Congress based on intelligence issues. There were reforms to how wiretapping could be done because of some of those abuses. So when things would go really off the rails, the next administration, if they're fair-minded people and people of good faith and have integrity, they will push much harder, not just to go back to how it was, but maybe even put in more structural protections. Like, for example, a boring thing, but that's a big deal. The president basically willy-nilly firing inspectors general who were there to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. And you know what? There are bills circulating in Congress, I don't know what will become of them, that I'm supportive of, that allow more protections for those inspectors general who can't be fired so easily and maybe have to be fired only for cause. None of these things is going to stop a totally corrupt, unhinged president from doing bad things, but you can help. You can help. So one is passing some of those things, but the other is having a culture of people who believe in their bones that those are not the right things to be doing.
And what do you think there will be other restrictions placed on the executive branch that will,
I think it's all going to be in play. The problem is, I don't know what's going to happen in the Senate, but look, Republicans, if there's all these things that Donald Trump has done, lots of policies are bad, I think, because one might disagree with them because they think of them as conservative policy. But a lot of the things that he's done have nothing to do with being a Republican or being conservative. They're just right out trashing of constitutional principles and law enforcement principles and fairness. I mean, a ton of them. And that universe of bad stuff that the president has done, that can be done by a Democrat. That can be done by a Democratic socialist. Those kinds of things. That can be done by an independent. And so I think it's in the interest of everybody to say, okay, we had this experience with Donald Trump. No Republican wants a demagogue Democrat to take the White House and be able to stomp all over the norms like this past president has done. So, hope springs eternal that there is some meeting of the mind, like, we had that thing, and you're right. We don't want any future president, because the next time it might be a Democratic president. I mean, I would hope not, but it could be, and maybe there's some opportunity for reform for that reason.
Hey, one more question before we go, which I just actually thought of, Preet. The Supreme Court, that was a big topic prior to the election. I don't know where packing the court, that term came from, but I guess that's the term of art. How do you feel about, John and I were talking, should there be term limits on Supreme Court justices? Amy Coney Barrett, 45. You can see how these, how President Trump got these young justices. So they have these life terms. How do you feel about the makeup of the court? And is this something that the Democrats don't like because they happen to not be in power at the right time?
Well, the Supreme Court is an odd institution. It's a good institution, and the judiciary is an important institution. And you're seeing, by the way, one of the great bulwarks against bad things happening and violating the norms is the courts. And as we said at the beginning of the conversation, there are people who are appointed by this president who are ruling in favor of the law as opposed to on the political side of the person who appointed them. The Supreme Court is a little bit out of whack, and I don't know what there is to be done about it. And this talk about expanding the court, packing the court, or term limits is not really going to go anywhere unless something dramatic happens in January and those 2 Georgia Senate seats go to the Democrats, because they just don't have both chambers, and it's not going to fly unless they do. So it's kind of an academic point. Well,
what if they do? I mean, there is a possibility.
Yeah. Look, but there are some, red state Democrats who have said that they're not into the idea. I mean, I think President Biden said before the election that he would appoint a commission, a panel to study it, which sounds like a way of sort of, not being hell bent. Yeah, but I think the fundamental problem that really does need addressing is an imbalance that's taken place in the court over the last 50 or 60 years based on just happenstance and the vagaries of who dies when and who retires when. Because over the course of many decades, I used to have this figure off the top of my head. You would expect over the course of like a half century or a century, right, there to be, roughly commensurate with the number of years that one party has the presidency, that they would have that proportion of Supreme Court seats. And you find that is not the case. And I think it's something like, 15 out of the last 18 or 15 out of the last 17 or 16 out of 18, but some really disproportionate number of Supreme Court picks have been made by by Republican presidents. And that's sort of, it is what it is. Back at the founding of the Republic, people didn't, live and serve on the bench routinely till their 80s. So maybe that's a cause for rethinking it. But, Jimmy Carter had a 4-year term, got 0 picks. Donald Trump also had a 4-year term, got 3 because of happenstance. And so I am sympathetic to the view that over time, you can have a system in which, if it's not looked at, it is not reflective of where the country is. And you're going to have Donald Trump's gone, and hopefully he will not come back in 2024. These justices are going to be there for decades. And if the country begins moving in one direction, as evidenced by who they put in the White House the next 3 or 4 or 5 times, but you have a Supreme Court that's frozen, in amber, based on what happened previously, because the Republicans got young appointees. That's not a great thing, and that causes tension in the democratic system.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, as you said, if the Democrats take the Senate, if it's discussed, or if people just forget about it and move on. Do you have any interest in working in a Biden administration?
I was in public service for 17 years. If something makes sense, I would consider it. I'm enjoying doing this stuff too. There are many great people for that position and for other positions. If someone calls, I'll take the call, but I don't have any plans to be going in, no.
Right now, but you'd be open.
I'm always open to public service opportunities. I agreed to continue serving when Donald Trump became the president-elect because I believe in public service. So yeah, of course.
You in fact met with him, right?
I did.
What was that like, Preet?
It's a little bit insane. This was right after Thanksgiving, and I didn't expect to be asked to stay. I had made plans to go on vacation with my family because I thought I would be leaving for the private sector. And as I've said in other places, the meeting was fine. He was cordial, except he did ask me for my telephone number, which was an odd thing for the president-elect to ask you for your digits. I had no relationship with him. And then, as some people know, he called me twice during the transition, and then he called me, about 7 or 8 weeks after he became the president, and I didn't return the call. And the next day I was asked to resign. But I thought that was a firewall that was important to have in place, further to what we've been discussing. And a norm was being violated with the sitting president calling the United States attorney who he asked to stay on and who has jurisdiction, as a legal matter over his properties, his businesses, his nonprofit, etc. No good could come of my having some kind of, by the way, a phone call in which the Attorney General of the United States was not a part of and was not in the loop on. And, people want to listen to the first episode of my podcast. Stay tuned. I go into this at some length from 3 years ago.
Right, I remember.
That was the first sign to me personally that he was kind of off the rails. That was before I knew that he had a separate meeting with Jim Comey and asked him for personal loyalty. This is a person who does not understand, I think he understands, but doesn't care about crossing those lines.
Yeah.
And how is it going to look if he's having side conversations with people, as we now know, repeatedly asking people in his government, although they're supposed to be separate from him, to punish his adversaries and to save his allies? Can't have that.
I think you call that boundary issues.
Boundary issues, yes. He has some of those.
Anyway, hey, Preet, it's so good to see you. Do you want to say hi, John? John has been listening.
Sir, I just see his shadow, from which I'm inferring, like Plato, I'm inferring things about him. How are you, sir?
I'm good. That was a great conversation. You two ought to do this more often. I learned a little something.
I've never done Instagram Live. The first 5 minutes didn't go well. I don't think I'm dressed appropriately for Instagram Live either.
And we figured it out. And
you managed expectations.
These are kind of fun because they're relaxed and casual. You can talk for a while. Some comments are idiotic, but most of them are smart. And
I try to look at them. They're going pretty fast.
Yeah, they go fast. And
I saw a couple of mean ones.
People watching, Preet, are very big fans of yours. So maybe you'll do this again when a big legal story comes up. And I think it would be fantastic personally if you worked in the Biden administration, Preet.
Well, thanks for the vote of confidence.
They could do a lot worse.
We'll stay tuned, as they say.
Stay tuned. All right.
See you guys. Great to talk to you.
Podcast called Stay Tuned. Check it out. And Preet, love to you and your family.
Thanks. You too.
Okay.
I don't even know how to hang up.
Just hit the live and it'll go away.
Oh, okay. All right. I want to be on here forever. Okay.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye. I think. Wait.